The U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services said it halted all asylum decisions. Joining us to discuss is Mark Lamb, a former Pinal County sheriff and current congressional candidate. And we have Robin Biro, a U.S. Army Ranger veteran and Democratic strategist who previously served as an Obama regional campaign director. First of all, thank you both for joining us today. And I'll start with you, Robin. President Trump recently commented on pausing immigration from certain countries for a very long time. In your view, is this an effective way to protect the American people and society?
I actually don't have a problem with him pausing asylum, Don, because he's got the right to do so as commander-in-chief. And look, I'll be intellectually honest with you here. This person did come over under the Biden administration. But I want to be clear here that they served in the Afghan Special Forces who were trained by the CIA. And that's why he later applied for asylum under the Trump administration and received asylum. So, we've got somewhere a failure here. I'm not exactly sure where that is, but I think it's smart actually to pause asylum and look at where the failure was and pause it till we have more information, Don.
So, Mark, can I get where you stand on this issue, pausing asylum, pausing immigration from third world countries? Yeah.
Look, I'm 100% in favor of this. While we may not know exactly how this guy achieved his asylum, if it was under President Trump, came under President Biden, what his status was when he was helping, or if he was the U.S. military. The fact is we had a ton of people, millions of people that came in virtually unvetted and unvetted over the last 4 years under the Biden administration. We saw it firsthand in Arizona. There was people coming from all over the world. They were coming by the thousands a day. There was no possible way for them to vet them. So I absolutely think that we need to do this. Look, how many military lives do we need to lose before we make hard decisions? I love that President Trump, as the commander-in-chief, says 2 is too many. We are going to put a stop to this. We are going to make sure that anybody who claims asylum in this country has been properly vetted.
So, Robin, do you agree with that? Do you think the U.S. should improve its vetting process dramatically?
Probably so, but let's be clear. This person was vetted twice, first under the Biden administration and then again under the Trump administration when he applied for political asylum. And it's a pretty stringent process, especially under this administration, to apply for political asylum. But what we know of this individual, Mr. Lakenwall, is that he spun out of control. He lost his job. Things were going really well, according to his caseworker, but he lost his job. Things went really bad. And then he locked himself in a bedroom and didn't come out for 2 years. That should have been a red flag right there for the caseworker. And I know that they did notify that something was wrong, but come on, they had to have known that something definitely was wrong with this individual mental health wise.
So, Mark, what is your response to that this individual was vetted during the Biden administration and during the Trump administration?
Well, I think what we keep doing is we keep going back to a single individual, but let's look at it as a broader picture. In April, we had an Afghan guy, that same situation, who pulled a gun and shot at police. They ended up getting into a police shootout on a traffic stop. We most recently had a guy that was alleged of planning a bombing. These are not isolated incidences, and I don't think we should just focus on this one particular guy. As a whole, we need to look at it and say the system has been broken for 4 years. It needs to be revamped. It needs to be fixed. And there's the amount of removals for asylum claims is as high as 97% in many of the courts. And so a lot of these asylum claims are false in the first place. So let's get beyond this one guy. I know this is the tragic incident we're focused on, but I think we need to be looking at it. And this is what President Trump is doing, is saying we better revamp this and take a look at it on a much larger scale, because this is not an isolated incident. He is not the first person that came to this country under an asylum claim who has committed violence against American citizens, military, or police.
Okay, Robin, what do you say to that?
There's a mental health problem. My co-panelist here is exactly right. And like I said, I don't have a problem with pausing asylum. And a lot of these people, I really do think, especially if they came from places like Afghanistan. I served there, right? I did a couple tours there. And this was an Afghan national who we trained in the Afghan Special Forces. He saw hard combat. One of his best friend actually died while seeking asylum here in the United States. So, he was under significant mental duress. We've got a mental health crisis right now in our country, and that's why, as my co-panelist Mark said, look at the bigger picture. These shootings tend to happen by people who are in duress as far as mental health is concerned.
Mark, where do you stand on the level of immigration the United States should have? Do you think the U.S. should have at least a base level of immigration?
Well, I think first of all, I'd like to say what Robin talked about, the mental health piece of this. Not only do we have mental health from people that have come from countries we really don't know anything about them, we have a mental health crisis in America as well that we've got to get on top of. So we need to reduce this problem down as much as possible so we can focus on Americans first. Then we can start to deal with other problems throughout the world. But I think Americans in this country want to see us deal with Americans first and foremost. So I think the amount of immigration, we already have a legal channel. What I'm not okay with is I think the amount should be zero illegal immigration into this country. And that is the problem that President Trump is having to fix. Let's not be angry at President Trump for the decisions he has to make today, because of decisions, poor decisions that were made under the Biden administration for 4 years. Now the guy that has to clean it up is shouldering the anger that is oftentimes we see in our communities, but it comes from the result of the actions of the Biden administration, Mayorkas, Harris. These are the folks that are responsible for a lot of this. Now we've got to fix it. Let's not be angry with the person that actually has the stones to fix what was created by the Biden administration.
So, Robin, earlier you talked about a mental health crisis situation in the nation. I'm wondering if social media and the media has had a role to play, in this tragic incident where these two National Guardsmen were shot.
It's hard to tell in this one specific instance because this gentleman literally locked himself in a dark room for nearly 2 years. So who knows what he was consuming as far as media goes or social media. I have a feeling he just kind of checked out and removed himself from society. But we know that he lost his job. Things just spiraled out of control. He had a family to feed. Like I said, things were going well at one point in time, but what I want the viewers to understand is that if you know somebody personally in your sphere of influence who suddenly, is doing well and then 1 minute loses their job or checks out of society, you haven't heard from them in a while, you need to check on that person, because that's what happens, especially with men. Men put huge priority on their jobs. When they lose a job, they feel like a failure, an abject failure to their families, particularly if they come from other countries and if they're the head of household. So, make sure that you follow up with people that you haven't heard from in a while.
Okay, Mark, why do you think we've seen such a dramatic increase in violence against law enforcement, whether we're talking about National Guard or ICE?
Our politicians in the media, they continue to go out and say reckless things like calling ICE the Gestapo or talking about our military, the efforts that we saw in Washington, D.C. to curtail crime under the bad policies of Democrats in those areas. We're seeing it in Portland. We're seeing it in so many areas. And then we have politicians that go on and they encourage us and they inflame this type of rhetoric and behavior. We shouldn't be surprised when we see it play out on the streets of America, where people go against our law enforcement or our military for merely doing the job that Congress has set forth. And so I think that is one of the biggest pieces of it. It's only amplified. You bring up social media. It's only amplified on social media, where people are constantly driving a wedge amongst us as Americans. We need to get back to being Americans first. Whether we agree politically or not, we all have a common interest, which is the betterment of this country. And the problem with a lot of the folks that have been brought here under asylum or refugee status is they continue to maintain allegiance for the countries that they came from. And we need people that have an allegiance to this country, to America, who want to see it succeed. I think all of us are sick and tired of seeing people come here and fly some other country's flag because they didn't. If you don't like it here, you are welcome to leave at any time. That is the beauty of living in America. But I think that our politicians and our media have only amplified this and thrown gas on the fire, and it has been reckless and dangerous for law enforcement and military.
Okay, Robin, I want you to respond to that, but I also want to ask you, because we played a clip earlier before this interview of President Trump saying if he had the power to denaturalize, he would absolutely use that power for criminals, of course, who came to the U.S. Can you just comment on that as well? Where do you stand?
For criminals, sure. Naturalization is a constitutional right, though, so that's where things get touchy. I'm no constitutional law professor, but I know enough about it to know that there are implications as far as that goes constitutionally. But look, like I said, he's the commander in chief. He's got the right to make decisions based on the people who voted for him. But I want to make a point. He represents all of the country, not just the people who voted for him. But he did win based off of his campaign promises. And one of those, Don, make no mistake, was tightening up immigration. And I acknowledge the fact. My co-panelist Mark is right. There was a problem under the Biden administration. I myself was blind to it for a long time. I thought literally when my friends on the left were saying that that's just a Republican talking point, that was true, and I dismissed the concerns. And then I was horrified when I actually found out the truth, that the border really was practically wide open under the Biden administration. And that is a huge problem. And it's probably why we're having issues today to clean that up.
Okay, can I ask you the same question, Mark, about what Trump said about denaturalizing?
Look, I think American citizenship for some people that have come here and have gained citizenship through a green card process or something else is a privilege. And I like Robin, I'm not the constitutional authority either, but I also think that there should be some sense of accountability if you come here and you do something against our country. I'm not okay with that. Look, and I think a lot of Americans are not okay with that. That's something we're going to have to take a look at. I'm running for the U.S. Congress because I hope to be part of the solution in fixing a lot of these problems with immigration. I think we've had problems that have been avoided for decades for political reasons. They've avoided fixing these, and I want to get in there and fix them. We can't keep putting executive orders on it. While I agree with the executive orders that President Trump has put on, I think it has actually stopped the bleeding as it relates to the border and immigration. We've got to do a lot more. And now we need Congress to make these things law and make a good immigration process so we don't continue to have these problems long term. But I am all for protecting America and Americans. I think that is what Americans expect from their elected officials. And I think that's what not only I expect Washington to focus on, but when I get to Washington, D.C., I'll be focused on Americans as well.
Okay, Robin, how do you think we can improve this immigration system that we have in the United States?
What Mark just said is very true about the executive orders. Those are great, but they're just a temporary solution because the next administration, whoever wins an election next, can undo them basically on day one. So we need actual foundational repairs here to the immigration system. It has been broken for quite a long time. We've got to root it out.
Okay, Mark, we got to wrap up here. If you have any final thoughts, please go ahead.
Well, no, I think what Robin has said is, and that's why I think that it's important that we get people that understand we've got a lot of problems to fix. We're not going to fix these overnight. But I think that President Trump is doing what is necessary. Look, as a leader, I was a sheriff for 8 years. I was expected to make the tough decisions, even when it wasn't popular. But it was what was right to protect my people and their constitutional rights and their American way of life. President Trump has shown that he is willing to do that. And I get that a lot of Americans may or may not like it. But like Robin has eloquently put, he is the commander in chief. He is the executive of this country. He gets to make those decisions. And I think he has been well within his authority as a president to do so. And while Congress has rendered itself ineffective over the last several decades, what should be the most powerful branch of government has abdicated their duties to the judicial branch and the executive branch. in that environment, I'm glad to see President Trump making the tough decisions and doing what's necessary to protect Americans and the American way of life.
Well, all right. Great conversation today. Thank you both for joining us. Mark, Robin, pleasure.
Thank you. Nice to meet you,
so
Robin.
much.